So today, Donald Stojack's actually going to converse with two interesting people at once, but you're all interesting people. And I've been going back and forth with Erik and Richard, and then they've been going back and forth with each other. And I think we've landed on something that is really beneficial to unpack with all of us together.
Wow.
And we may take a couple of weeks. We might take 3 weeks on this. So FYI, this is like part one, if that's okay
Oh,
with you
gee.
guys. And I've got it's kind of interesting coming into the new year. It's like, what am I going to do? It's like, have I gone through my network and have I talked to everybody interesting? And I've actually, every time I do that, something else pops up. I have relied on Richard Kielbon for quite a while now to kind of be my uh, research brain because he's so good at this part of it. And he brings me around to square one because I can get kind of woo-woo at times. And Richard just, how do I say, Richard, what do you say you do to me? You reel me in, or you, hey, Donald, get real.
I didn't know I did anything, Donald, but I'm glad to hear there's something.
Yeah, so he can bring me back to reality really, really fast. And Erik and I have had a really good bond because we've got, all three of us are musicians, full disclosure, but it's just like when you meet the people. So I think we're like the Three Musketeers, or we're the three old gray-haired guys.
There you go.
We're all about in the same age bracket. We've been there, we've done that. So today, and you saw the picture of the BMW, right, on the Facebook page. Why did
Jeez, I was shocked.
So Richard, why did I post that?
Oh my God. Well, Erik and I did a session and recorded it the other day, and I sent it to Donald. And that is my car. And there was a story that goes with it that Donald is interested in. So he said, "What are you driving? What color is it?" And there it is. He pulled it up and posted it. But there's a story to why a guy who is totally into innovation drives a 38-year-old car and doesn't want a new one. So
let's start with that, because I think it's a good precursor to how we're going to unpack this.
Yeah. Well, the story as it's going to unfold is we're going to talk today about purposes and how people are driven by purposes and what that means in terms of problem solving, creativity, your business, your clients. And we talked, BMWs, the ego, coolness, all the stuff that people say about BMWs. And I told Donald, I have no interest in any of that. And I drive a 38-year-old car. You can tell I don't. But there's something about it. I've got the suspension set up to a very high level, so I can go on the twisties and hit those at double the speed limit. That's an emotion. It feels a certain way. We're going to talk about people have emotional purposes besides rational purposes. They don't do it anymore like they did it back then for a lot of reasons, and I won't bore you with all the little details, but they don't and can't do it like that anymore. And it's it's about the feeling, and we're going to talk today about marketing and the creativity and all that business, and move toward the idea of people have emotional purposes that they pursue and achieve. And I know, Donald, in a lot of marketing things we talked about emotion and feeling a lot in marketing. So that's sort of a lead into what we're, it's about the feeling.
Yeah, and I'm going to let Erik kind of take the lead in picking Richard's brain. Because there again, sometimes it's like, and we're going to go back and forth on this. So full disclosure, I'm not going to embrace entirely over to Erik, but I mean, I think this insight is really, really crucial for us. And so, with Richard's architect background, sometimes it's so dang boring and dry, right? And you kind of think, well, where does that fit in? Okay, but I think we have turned a corner on this for some major insight that I think is going to be very crucial for all of us. Erik, that's your cue.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Hello, everybody. This is great. And just as intro and a little context here, sometime back in this group, it might have been one of our earliest meetings when Donald was talking with Richard. Richard mentioned breakthrough thinking, which is not a term that I'd heard before. He mentioned a book, and as I frequently do, I made a note of that and I bought the book because when I hear a title that has thinking in it and break things like that, I salivate. So I got the book, and next thing I know, we'd reached out, and Richard and I were talking, and I'm fascinated with those ideas for all kinds of reasons, which aren't relevant to this conversation right now. And as Richard talked to me more about it, it was like, oh my gosh, his pathway, his journey by encountering that book and the gentleman who wrote it, and then studying with that person is really fascinating. And it's given me a whole bunch of ideas that I've been able to incorporate in my work. So with that said, and also maybe to give us a little context, Richard White, could you tell us a little about where you were in life when you encountered the breakthrough thinking material, and then what you did with it?
Yeah, well, I've been an architect 45 years, so let's step back to 1990, however long that is now. What is that? 25, 35? I don't know which one it is.
Some of
35.
us are not even that old, but yeah.
No, there's in the
It's like-
room, there's not some people.
It's like
I know.
34 years, I think.
34 years, something like that.
I got Digi to laugh anyway.
Well, so I'd been an architect for whatever 45 minus 30 is, but I was in charge of putting together an 86-acre development for senior housing. And if anybody who's done a real estate development knows, I mean, it's no surprise, you either sell units or you're in trouble. And it was a recession, and they had spent a fortune developing the land, and we're now starting to sell units. And I had done some workshops with the seniors, to find out what they might like. And boy, was I off. They were almost not quite angry, but riled up that I had designed something that didn't fit what they really wanted. And so I'd responded to that and designed some units, and they were selling okay. But I had heard about a guy named Gerald Nadler down at University of Southern California, and he had researched his entire life, 50 years, how noted, famous solution finders, how they think. He researched their cognitive process, what goes on in their head, how they solve problems, what they do. And I went down to USC and studied with Gerald and got all excited about that process. And I'll tell you, the first unit house that I designed using that thinking was really the best seller over time. It was not the typical house you'd design for, let's say a family. Seniors don't have a family anymore, and they have a different lifestyle. And rather than doing the anthropology of going to somebody's house and observing them living, which is kind of an obstacle, I'd use this process to think the whole thing through. But that was very successful. And to take the story even back 45 years, I've always been really dissatisfied about how architects, the information we got to design things. It's very technical, square footages, rooms, relationships, budgets. I always felt like that was all very quantitative, but the qualitative stuff just simply wasn't there. So in 1990, this really satisfied that issue of getting to the qualitative issues of design and solution finding and creating a product.
So let us know. I'm going to say one thing, but maybe a few that motivated you beyond this success to align with this breakthrough thinking methodology, if you will.
Oh, you're asking me what motivated me in that regard?
Yeah, or give us a couple of things. The success of this project was clear. Were there other pieces that you discovered with that success that motivated you to continue to use it?
Yeah, as I used it, it's like a game you can play in your own head. Back then cell phones were just starting, and I sort of played that breakthrough game in my head, and I could see that. I could see in my mind following through the process that cell phones and digital products, they needed to extend human capacities. They needed to extend our capacity as humans. They could do a lot more than just be a phone. And then I found that unfolded in front of me. As I played the game in my head, musicians, artists, I'm really into that. I always, very frequently, 80, 90% of the time, I'd always listen to an artist who is successful. And they always started the same. What I was trying to accomplish was, what I was going after was. They always had a bigger purpose that they were going after. So everything around me started correlating with what I had studied with Gerald Nadler. So is much bigger than doing arc. He's studying how the human mind operates. And that's just incredibly fascinating. And that applies to a lot more than designing a building.
Could you unpack, let's say, three key pieces that could be useful to those of us here on the call who coach and consult and work in different areas, but three pieces that are kind of essential that any one of us could take and run with in our own work?
Well, a couple different things. First off, I think I don't know how many have taken Evan's class, but his thing is what do you want? What do you want to avoid? And is there a third one? I don't remember. What do you want? What do you want to avoid? What I've discovered as a designer is people don't know what they want. So you're asking people what they want, but they don't know what they want, or what they want doesn't serve them as well as it could. There are numerous projects where if I had followed what the client asked me to do, that wouldn't be a good project for them. And so with your clients, you have to be, I'm not going to use the word careful. There's a different way to go about finding out what's going to serve your client. And that word is purpose. Now, what Gerald Nadler discovered is good problem, normal people, when they try to solve a problem, they make a big mistake, which is they analyze the problem first. And what that does is prejudice your mind with a whole cluster of information that isn't helpful. It's confusing. What good problem solvers do is they look at the big picture first. What's the big picture? Where are we going? Where am I trying to go? They look for the big picture, get you to the solution. How that works for a coach is you might be better off to ask a whole series of questions. What are your purposes? What are your objectives? What are you really about? What's happening? What's the bigger picture? Where are we trying to go? Instead of what do you want? That leaves you, the service provider, to be more creative. It opens up doors for your clients to start with purposes and then move to some other there's a momentum to it that maybe we can discuss, Eric. But stepping away from what do you want to what's your purpose opens up a lot of doors. So you asked me for three. I'm not sure I'm coming up with another two at the moment. Certainly, if you've got a business, every decision you have to make is important. And asking yourself, what is the purpose for that element of my business? What am I trying to accomplish there? Asking that first instead of analyzing your problem is going to make you very much more creative in your business. And the same thing in your personal life. I just read three pieces of research yesterday. People who people who have a purpose in life, adopt a purpose, find a purpose, are much healthier, have much better outcomes in life than people who don't. And I don't believe the old, the woo-woo thing of going off into the woods and digging deep into yourself and finding that purpose down in there somewhere. I don't believe in that stuff. People you're able to create a purpose, invent one, devise one for yourself that works. Those are three areas, Eric, that come to mind right away.
Can you give us, I find when I'm working with something, sometimes we come up with a solution and we're high-fiving and sharing, whether I'm trying to go through a consultative sales process or working with a client or whatever. And we're actually maybe celebrating too soon because we solved the wrong problem. And ultimately, what you're saying is we get clouded way too quick in the process
Yes.
and miss the best opportunity that's
Yeah.
absolutely there.
No, that's very true. One of my quotes that I use is the worst thing you can do in business is do an excellent job of solving the wrong problem.
Mhm.
Get buried in that.
I've seen it early in my career. People would try to find the perfect logo, right? And
Okay.
when they shouldn't be bothering with that unless they're in business. I mean, this was endemic 20, 30 years ago. You start a business, you're going to get business cards. Oh, I need a logo on my business cards. And so I was guilty of the same thing. I mean, I spun my wheels for a month and spent way too much money to get the perfect logo. So I got the perfect logo on my business cards and matching stationery, but it was the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when Eric and I were talking yesterday, I like to say thinking has momentum. In other words, I'm trying to explain how the brain kind of works. We don't know things we don't already know. So if you try to solve a problem only with what you know today, you're going to be very prejudiced with you can't be very creative. So how do you crack this nut of trying to find things you don't know? Well, the answer is asking the right questions. And so if you ask certain questions up front and then build momentum from there, you end up at a very creative place. And that momentum,
What are some of those potential questions?
yeah.
And not necessarily that there's like a one size fits all here, but give us an example.
Well, first off, I'm really into businesses love to have a purpose. They advertise this is the purpose of our business. That's too fluffy. What we do is work with purposes plural. I work with we dozens of purposes we identify. Then we break them into components. Then we put them into hierarchies. Then we work with purposes until we find the highest one. I'll come back and explain what that means later.
And so we're kind of going from head to heart. So what you're saying is don't start from heart, start from head.
Well, yes, but what happens very quickly is I've just Gerald Nadler is an industrial designer and he's very into designing mechanical things. But as an architect, I started using his method and I discovered I'd have to call Jerry and say, Jerry, I keep ending up in these emotional things, these personal things. That doesn't fit your formula. Well, I'm designing a building which has emotional things. I'm not designing widgets. So we also have emotional purposes to satisfy. So we do get to the heart. You do start with tactical things or strategic ideas where I want to go. But if you keep pushing the question to the higher purposes, you end up with emotional issues. So the other questions you say, what questions should you ask? That's a great thing for you to ask me, Donald, because the answer is I don't know.
Ah,
But the answer is one of the things you should do early is identify questions you should be asking. You should look for the questions, try to identify, try to invent questions that you should be asking. Now, don't look for the answers. Again, you're messing up the momentum of your thought. Look for questions that you should be asking. What things don't we know? Where do we need to go? What needs to happen? I don't understand. What don't I understand? You need to look for those questions up front and then answer them later. Now, once we've established some purpose.
and the three that come to mind for me, I think back to some of the brilliant minds I've been up against when I did projects with Jay Abraham, when we would kind of debrief on those projects, he'd always ask, what else?
Mm-hmm.
Where else? Who else?
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Well, kind of. If you've got a business, it might be maybe this is a dumb example, but I have an old car, so I'm in car dealerships all the time. I don't find the car, there's two kinds of guys I go to. One really satisfies me emotionally. Somebody in that business asked, what's the experience of my customer? What are their concerns? What are their fears? What are they struggling with? They ask those questions. What's happening with my customer? What's the interface with them? That mechanic has designed this incredible interface in his lot. He'll check out your car, take pictures of all the problems, post it on a website. It's there forever for you to review. This is priority 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That guy, the lobby is wonderful. The people at the counter are trained to be wonderful. They have a wonderful interface. Somebody asked the questions, what are the concerns of my clients? Other guys, the lobby is dirty. The guys have dirty clothes. They're not asking, they're not polite. And when they have a problem to your car, they don't explain it. They don't have the details you want. Somebody asked the right questions in that better shop. What are we missing? What are we not seeing? Those are the kind of questions you ask, digging into what's happening in that other person's world. That's an example. Now, if you're a coaching client, obviously there's a real parallel there. Because they might not tell you right up front, but you might ask the questions that get you there.
Like, I want to lose 10 pounds is
Right.
very superficial. It's like you got to keep
Right.
digging.
Yeah.
Why, number one, why that number? Why 10? Why not 9 pounds? Why not 12 pounds? And then what happens if you only lose 5? What happens if we can get to 15? And then what's the other ripple effect? What's behind that? And
Well,
is that
what's the experience of that person you're trying to serve? They probably looked at a lot of the other stuff. You can probably identify the other things that they've looked at. You can probably identify the major things, major trends that are confusing and not working. You can probably help them sort through that. They're having this experience at the other end that if you spend some time asking those questions, you can find out what that experience is and how to help them navigate that. So I talked about momentum. I don't, you're, so that's the starting point. The
Is this, I
momentum.
don't want to pause for a moment. Is this helping you guys out as we're unpacking this? When I, Richard sent over the video that audio that him and Erik did, and I started listening to the thing, and I've listened to it twice now. So Erik, just full disclosure, I've gone through the thing twice and taken 2 pages of notes here. So I just want to make sure it hit me, and I've been up against some really, good mentors and stuff. And but as I started unpacking it, I was like going, oh my gosh, it's like almost like we're at the Holy Grail type of thing. And then I was debriefing with Richard yesterday, and it's really imagine in a marketplace, like whatever you're coaching, like Janelle, you're working with divorced people, and Terry, like, people will say with gut health and stuff like that. So there's all these people out there. Okay. So everybody else is doing that. Everybody else is a life coach. Everybody else is a business coach. Okay. And as I using the example with Richard, he's outside of Spokane, Washington there. Okay. So in Spokane, there's any number of plumbers in Spokane. Okay. And so say there's 5 main plumbing companies, right? And you can say, well, what do I do, right? So the trick is, and they're all using the same tools, right? They all go to Lowe's for their parts. I mean, they got the same supply. I mean, what's the difference? I mean, they're all going to turn the wrench the same way. Okay. There's another coach helping about gut health, or, helping I mean, Tom's got a unique one with his, but still there's going to be somebody else out there that helps people with that kind of an experience, but like, you know, what is that little bit in there? Because there is a different clarity, a different thinking. It is a small percentage. This is like a small hinge that swings a big door. That makes sense. When you can find this little tiny thing here, okay, this breaks you out from the pack. So now you're not just one of 5 plumbing companies, right? You become the premier. You become the preeminent one, right? J. Abraham 101 strategy of preeminence, right? It's like, how do you, in essence, that's what we're going after here. Does that make sense? Head nodding. I love heads nodding. It's my love language. Is when you guys nod your head like, yeah, that's
They do this. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Donald, and what I, I'm excited that you're excited about this. Tell me, or help me and Erik understand a little bit. I think you mentioned something about, going down with Eben and doing some brainstorming and so on.
And
You and
in
how kind of can you talk about that or not? Or should I
well,
contrast kind of what happened to there and what you and I are talking about
in
in
so
terms of
you know,
planning and
in real time,
strategy?
and I was just in another big mastermind cohort here this morning, right? And your big bold statement is that brainstorming does not work,
Yeah.
right? And I got that hit me between the eyes. Okay, so I have typically gone in with clients and done brainstorming sessions. And when I heard you say that, I had to stop and go, "Oh my God, you're right. Brainstorming does not work." Why doesn't it work?
Well, there's several. You want me to answer that?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
see, we've all been here. It's like we're all like, oh, let's brainstorm on that, right? It's like typical Erik, right?
Yeah.
We're sitting like let's figure this. And I've done it in my music company. We get together at least every other month and brainstorm, right? And I'm thinking, and when you said that, I had to stop and go, oh my gosh, I've been so close. In other words, I was so, and I've been mentored by the best, but yet I was off track on that one little item that if I could change, would change the course of everything for the better. Why does brainstorming not work?
A lot of the reasons are social. First off, if you're going to, and you've all experienced, anybody who's been in a group's experiences, you got one guy who talks the most, one guy who sits in the corner with his arms folded, and you got some people in the middle. That's first. And then secondly, our brains aren't that fast. What works is, well, so that's one thing. The other thing, and you experience this when you talk to me about going down to be with Evan and so on, being in a free for all just creates a bunch of dumb ideas. I know it's popular. No idea is a bad idea. Throw them all on the table. There's some truth to that, but you're in a business, you're trying to solve problems. There needs to be some sense of order and organization to the whole thing. So how do you do that without clipping creativity? This is why the thing of purposes is so interesting. So okay, let me back up a little. What works instead of brainstorming is you have something you're trying to work on, then you send everybody off to their own desk to be alone for a day. Then you have people bring their ideas. People have had some time to contemplate, to process, get in their own world, bring something back of some substance instead of just impulsively throwing stuff out like crazy. That works much better. The second thing is what Gerald and I do with creativity is the discovery that he made is people will fight over ideas all day and all long. They'll fight over values. But what I can always do in a group, and I experience this many times, we can always find unifying purposes. Liberal, conservative, if you look at their problems, they got a purpose they're going after. They do it totally differently, but we can find some kind of unifying purpose. So if we can identify those unifying purposes and start from there, now we can have an organized approach to looking for something. An example with the car thing is my purpose would be we want our clients to have a really smooth experience, or we want our client to, what are our purposes in taking care of people? To give them a smooth experience, to help them understand what's going on, to make everything clear to them, to have a good interface between them and them, to be able to communicate clearly to them. If you talk about the multitude of purposes you're trying to accomplish, and then identify one you really want to go after. Now, guys, let's talk tomorrow. Give me your ideas how we get there. Now you
It's
have
interesting, and I want to kind of drill down on that a little bit so you kind of see the difference there, because you've got to keep your eye on, I think so many times we're trying to talk to the average person as opposed to talking to your lead user. So say the car dealership, okay?
Mhm.
It's not every person that they want in there. Okay. But the person that they want in there obviously is a person that can buy another car, right?
Yeah.
And or can afford or wants to have their car fixed, right? That's not everybody. What they don't want in there is the person that wants to fix it themselves,
Yeah.
or they don't want the person in there that is going to massively defer maintenance till the car is lying dead in a ditch someplace, right? And I think as an example, the dealership where I go, and same thing, when you walk in, I mean, the way they greet you is like crazy. Like you feel like a royalty the minute you pull up. Okay. And I'm a busy business person. So they have a lounge that is set up for business people to continue working.
Yeah,
I mean, I
see,
could do a webinar from their lounge. Does that make sense?
that is so
And
smart. Yeah.
crazy high-speed internet. Okay. And I mean, I almost want to go over there sometimes just to record a podcast because it's a better environment. Does that make sense? It's like they're thinking this through. Who is their lead user,
They understood one of your purposes.
right? And they have a coffee bar there, and when you walk up, you get a ticket to go get whatever coffee drink you want and sit down, right? Does that make sense? And so it's like you don't want to talk to your average person. You want to talk to the lead user, the lead potential ideal client out there.
And it's not just because that's your client. In
Mhm.
our work,
But
you
but
know,
but you also you're designing for them. Does that make sense? And now you're standing out.
that person that you're talking about, Donald, is smarter on a lot of levels. Now, I don't use smarter, that might be insulting. People who are lead users who understand they're better at understanding the product lead users
If your
who
coach,
thought about it, they're engaged with it. The average user is, oh, what, okay, that's pretty good. I'll respond to what you give me. The laggard behind the innovation curves, I don't, whatever. I just give it to me. The lead user is somebody who's studied the product, has opinions about the product, has sensitivity. They're connoisseurs, in other words. If you're Donald, you like Scotch. If you want to design, you want to know about a good Scotch, you talk to the connoisseur. You talk to somebody who's thought about it. And maybe you're not designing $100 or $1,000 bottle of scotch, but if you're designing a $40 bottle, $50, $60 bottle of scotch, you want to know what the connoisseur thinks. You want to go to the lead user.
yeah.
So in terms of your clients and your avatar, find your avatar, find your avatar. You're not looking
If
for
you
the
if you're coaching, look for people who are coached. Right. And just like it was like if you're looking for coaching clients, find people who are coached, typically coached. Find people that they sign their kids up for swim lessons, right? When they go to the gym, they have a personal trainer. When they do yoga, they go to a yoga studio. They don't do it at home with a free YouTube video. Look for people who are used to being coached, used to being reaching out for extra help. Does that make sense? It's like that's not your average person. And I think so sometimes with when we reach out for coaching with like it's my marketing's not working, or I've talked to 10 people and none of them signed up for my coaching. Well, did you talk to 10 people who typically reach out for coaching, or do you talk to 10 people who have never been coached before in their life? You see, you're assuming that they don't want your coaching, right? You're trying to sell them on your coaching, and you realize they're not even sold on coaching, let alone your coaching.
and you know this from experience because you've been around the bend, right, Donald? This isn't
It's like with business owners. I do not want to coach or consult unsuccessful businesses. That's a red flag every day, and it's kind of counterintuitive because like, oh, they really see. When I first started coaching, think, oh, let me find businesses that are struggling. That's be a really great client. Oh no, no, no. I look for business people who are successful. Do you see the difference? When you look for business people who are successful, they're probably successful because they've gotten help. I know it's shocking. Look for Tony, right? If you look for people that are success, I mean, if I'm going to be a piano player, right? I'm looking for somebody who is a successful piano player, right?
well, they might be beginners, but the successful beginner is someone who actually
Yeah,
does the lessons you give them. That's
yeah,
that's
yeah,
at a level of success.
yeah. Yeah, you're looking for. Does that make sense? What you're looking for? Sometimes we're looking for the wrong doggone thing.
Yeah. So the discussion is about lead users.
Mhm.
Lead users are resources that are important. And in the process of coaching or decision making and so on, you're right. Those are the resources you turn to.
Mhm.
But I think we were talking about purposes and purposeful.
Yeah. Erik, this being part one, what have we missed anything here as far as encapsulating this part of it?
No, we've actually hit a whole bunch of things where the conversation with Richard the other day really went um ballistic. Maybe that's not the right word, but I'm going to use it, is when he got into the connection with feelings and
Mm-hmm.
emotions, which is not where you'd expect a conversation about design would
Mm-hmm.
take you. And where it may connect right here is uh, going back to the project that Richard mentioned at the very beginning when he was doing the senior housing and finally and realizing that he was in one place and they were another. And then when he was able to communicate with them about actually what they wanted. And in our conversation, Richard mentioned, some of the people wanted the bedroom to open onto the living room so they didn't have to walk down a hallway or have an impediment to them getting, which sounds either really obvious or really like, wait, where is that coming from? I'm curious though, when when you began listening and obviously hearing them and then responding, what did they do next? In other words, when you tapped into the emotions and the feelings, I'm just curious. I don't know the answer to that.
Well, it's the Steve Jobs thing. He said he never does surveys.
Mm.
I didn't get this from a survey.
Oh, but Richard, some experts have told me to do surveys.
I I I have a story about that too. If you're going to survey, know the questions to ask, which is what purposes are you trying to achieve it? But anyway, um, I got it from imagining the lifestyle. What are they trying to accomplish in their day? If you're retired, you're not rushing out in the morning, brushing your teeth, getting your hair done, and rushing out the door. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to throw the door open from the bedroom to the living room. You're going to get your slippers on. You're going to get a cup of coffee and you're going to hang out. It's a hangout morning, not a rush morning. How do you accomplish that? How would I know that we're able to hang out and enjoy things and just take a leisurely start to the morning? I didn't need a lot of help to imagine. Steve Jobs didn't need someone to tell him what he could do with a cell phone. There was already, he was, they say he's an innovator. I don't know if he is. There was already cell phones. He just did a better job. What can the purpose of that device be? He asked that question at some point. Um, now, if I was going to do okay, so you interview people. Let's go back to the lead user. What you don't do is send out a survey to everybody. And this has been reinforced in many business books I've read. You find a handful of people that are lead users and you have a conversation with them.
Digi, are you paying attention here? Okay.
That is much more
right.
powerful than doing a big survey.
Yeah.
You guys are into it. I can tell you're buying the product. You're important. You understand it. You read the magazines. You're involved. Tell me what's going on. Erik talked about, he did a thing this morning about obstacles. People have a hard time being in the creative process. Gerald Nadler, in his research, showed that only 2% of the population naturally does this thinking process. 2%. When I do these workshops, people have a hard time stepping into what I'm trying to do. You'll get some people who are just angry and don't want to do that. You'll get one person or so is excited. And then the middle, sometimes you can't do the process the way I want to do it. So you start with complaints. You start with annoyances. What do you want? Every complaint and annoyance you can identify, you can flip it into a purpose that isn't being satisfied. That's annoying to me because I'm trying to get something out of the deal and it's in my way. So if you can't get people to play with you in the purposes game, you can start with what are the frustrations, and you guys do this. What are the frustrations? What are your pain points? Every one of those frustrations and pain points is a purpose that's not being satisfied. But you need to make that flip to be creative. If you just fix the complaint, you're not being creative. But if you say, what is it you're trying to go after? And ask the questions, oh, how many different ways can I satisfy that? Now you're creative.
Got it.
Richard, can I ask you? Can I ask
go
you real
ahead.
quick? Have you ever said that before in those words?
Oh, sure. Sorry, I have.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I've been so into this for so long. My quest.
I'm just gonna I'm gonna interrupt you. Excuse me for interrupting you.
Go ahead, please.
That is a really, really, really powerful statement. I was writing it down as you were saying it. I don't know about anybody.
So Erik,
I just want to share that.
can you say it back at Richard?
I'm going to say it in a little different words.
Okay.
But the complaints and the annoyances and the mishigas that we get from people that's negative, we can flip it around, and within that is going to be a reflection on some level of a purpose that they maybe don't know how to put into words.
Yeah.
Breakthrough. I don't know. Talk about breakthrough.
I'm geeking out on this. Is this helping everybody? I'm thinking it's like you're kind of going right. It's like have I heard this before? I've sat it with so many experts, right? I've sat at their feet. I've been through so many programs, okay, members of crazy high level mastermind groups, and when I listen to this audio between Erik and Richard, I've listened to it twice now. I was like, my jaw dropped. It was right in front of me. Does that make sense? Are you guys seeing that? Richard, if we can I think we've got this part of it kind of unpacked a little bit.
Mhm.
If we reconvene next Thursday, and because we're not brainstorming here, right? We're identifying a clear purpose, and we're all gonna go back to our desks. Okay, did you, right? And we're gonna think. So what I want to do, if I could challenge each of you, okay, to kind of think on this, okay, and if we could use the Facebook group, um, maybe I want you to either, and I'll try to get this recording up pretty quickly here today. Um, what's our homework here, Eric? We want them to post some questions. Um,
How, see if you can come up with ideas about how this could satisfy something in your business
hmm,
or someplace you wish you had an answer for in your business, or a frustration or complaint you're having in your business that maybe changing your thinking or having a more productive thinking style might be good and productive for you.
yeah,
Solution finding. This is solution finding. How can you
yeah.
employ a good solution finding method? Where do you need that?
Does that
You
make
know,
sense to everybody?
one um inviter here for us is to think about when we hear ourselves say things like, I hate it when I talk to somebody who fill in the blank. Or now this could be a potential client, or when you're in a store trying to buy something these days. Sometimes you can't find a salesperson. Anyway, that's another. Um, I think we all, I'll speak for myself. I find myself somewhat regularly saying things like that to myself. And it's like, wait a second. You know, and I stopped to maybe unpack it or maybe not. I think though, when it comes to our coaching or our businesses, though, that's a question we really want to unpack in this other direction that I just thought about when Richard shared just now.
And so what we've uncovered here today is what I'm going to call big business thinking. Okay, this is crazy big business thinking. This is Fortune 10 level thinking. Does that make sense? This is the thing that makes Nike Nike. This is the thing that makes Starbucks Starbucks.
No, and I will
Right?
reinforce that by telling everybody that's true because in my reading, the big businesses are doing what's called design thinking.
Yeah.
They are bringing into their business an element that is learned from designers like myself and creative solution finders. They've learned that the MBA analytical half of doing business isn't working to keep their business alive. And big businesses are doing this big time, but small sized businesses and middle sized businesses have no idea about this stuff.
And so we've got to seek. Does that make sense? We have a secret weapon sitting right here. Are you kind of cluing in? I want to say I want people to go back, and I mean, Terry, it's like oh my gosh. It's like, so this is big business thinking, okay, scaled down for that, initial enterprise, maybe a small to medium size enterprise. Okay. Um, if you got this power, if you got this fuel in your tank, there's nothing that should be able to stop you in the marketplace. Does that make sense? This is how I want to just encapsulate it. If you're kind of snoozing on this, I just sit like this. And did as I see you're trying to break into the marketplace, I want to give you every chance here. Make sure you come back next week, right? And between this week and next week, we engage in the Facebook group, right? And we're ready to put Richard to the wall next week.
Oh, gee.
Yeah, I know, but because this is big. Okay. This is not little. This is really, really big. And Morris, I think you and we might even need a brainstorming session how we can utilize Richard, each of us here. Does that make sense? In what we're doing? Because this is crazy cool. Crazy cool. And so thank you, Eric, for to keep poking Richard. Richard, thank you for being who you are here, and thank you for reading all those doggone books on your wall. And so I just really appreciate that. I don't have to read the books. I says, Richard, buy this book and read it for me. Tell me what it's about and what to do with it. Sue, you don't have to know a lot. You got to know people that know a lot and just tap into them at the end of the day, right? It's just like, it's like every time recommends a book, I don't run out and get the book. I'll just be real honest with you. I just wait for him to tell me what it's about. Okay, tell me the 3 things I need to know. I don't got time to read that book. I do read some books, but it's just like you can get lost in reading books. So it's just kind of there. Okay, so this is part 1. Stay tuned for next week. We're definitely going to do a part 2, maybe a part 3 on this. Does that make sense? I don't want to wear this thing thin. But this is big. And Erik and Richard, that audio that I listened to, is that something that would be appropriate to share with people in some way?
Oh,
Or
yeah, we'd love it. There's a video, but it's a half a gig, so it's hard to translate.
yeah, let me I will think on that part of the process here.
The
But
audio is an hour and 10, so it's long.
yeah,
But it's
we
no,
could also
it's Erik interviewed me. Erik interviewed me. That's what happened in that audio, and he had a series of deep thinking questions to bring along to push me to answer this. So that's what the audio is about. Is
yeah,
Erik interviewing me with some good questions.
yeah. Well, okay, part
What I was
1.
going to say real quick is if it could be put into Otter AI or one of the other things, and
Yeah.
a transcript could be written too if someone doesn't want to sit and listen to the. I don't know if that.
Yep. So part 1's in the bag.